Imagine standing in Aberdeen, Scotland in 1837. Cobblestone streets echo with the sound of horse hooves, and the air is thick with the smell of burning coal from nearby factories. Amid this industrial scene, there's a man named Robert Davidson, a humble chemist with a bold dream. Born in 1804, Davidson wasn't a formally trained engineer, but a self-taught inventor, captivated by the mysterious power of electricity. At a time when the world was enchanted by steam, Davidson envisioned a different future. He believed electricity, a force still confined to laboratory experiments, could power an entire machine. Back then, electricity was still a novel concept. Scientists like Michael Faraday were just beginning to explore the laws of electromagnetic induction. Batteries, crude and bulky, were the only way to generate electric current. There was no power grid, no outlets, no infrastructure we take for granted today. But Davidson wasn't deterred by these limitations. In his small Aberdeen workshop, he began experimenting with zinc acid batteries, a young and unreliable technology prone to explosions. These batteries, made from zinc plates dipped in acid, were his only power source. They weren't powerful, but they were a start. His idea was simple yet revolutionary: build a vehicle powered by electricity. No smoke, no coal, no noise. Just the pure power of electric current. This was an idea ahead of its time, a vision even the greatest minds of the era struggled to grasp. In his workshop, Davidson became an archaeologist of the future, searching for an uncharted path. He had no team of engineers or a large budget. It was just him, with rudimentary tools, a few assistants, and an unwavering belief that electricity was the key. Picture him working late into the night, candlelight flickering over zinc plates and copper coils. Each experiment was a battle, leaking batteries, burnt wires, but he never gave up. For a Vietnamese audience, Davidson's story might recall innovators like Tran Dai Nghia, who crafted weapons from limited resources during wartime. Both were pioneers, working with what they had, despite overwhelming odds. But Davidson's journey wasn't just about engineering, it was about faith in something no one else dared to dream. At the time, steam locomotives dominated the world. They were the symbol of the Industrial Revolution, hauling goods and people across vast distances at unprecedented speeds. But they were also dirty, noisy, and dangerous. Davidson saw an alternative: a cleaner, quieter, more efficient machine. He named his invention Galvani, after the Italian scientist Luigi Galvani, who discovered the link between electricity and movement. With Galvani, Davidson wasn't just building a machine, he was trying to change the world. Step into Robert Davidson's workshop in 1841 and you'd feel an atmosphere buzzing with energy. Sparks fly as he welds copper wires, the sharp smell of acid stings the nose, and candlelight dances on old wooden walls. On his workbench, shiny zinc plates are neatly arranged beside acid jars, ready to become the heart of Galvani, the world's first electric locomotive. Galvani wasn't a sleek vehicle like today's VinFast VF A34. It was a 16-foot wooden beast, cumbersome with homemade batteries and crude electromagnetic motors. But in Davidson's eyes, it was a marvel, a leap into the future. Building Galvani was an enormous challenge. In the 1830s, batteries were still a primitive technology. There were no rechargeable batteries, no power grid, no technical standards. Davidson had to craft everything by hand. He used zinc acid batteries, a system he refined over years, where zinc plates reacted with acid to generate electricity. But these batteries were heavy, bulky, and only worked briefly before running dry. Each battery was a complex chemical puzzle, demanding absolute precision. A small mistake could cause a battery to overheat, leak, or worse, fail entirely. The motor of Galvani was also a feat of engineering. Inspired by Michael Faraday's experiments in electromagnetic induction, Davidson designed copper coils and magnets to create rotational motion. Imagine him sitting for hours, winding each coil, testing every connection, ensuring the current could translate into force. This wasn't just a technical challenge, it was a journey of perseverance. Every failure, a burnt coil, a weak battery, was a lesson, but also a step closer to his dream. The historical context cannot be ignored. In the 1840s, steam was the king of industry. Steam locomotives like George Stephenson's rocket had turned railways into the driving force of the Industrial Revolution, transporting goods and people at unprecedented speeds. But they also brought smoke, noise, and dangerous accidents. Davidson saw an alternative: electricity. An electric-powered machine would emit no smoke, require no coal furnace, and need no massive water stations. It would be the future: cleaner, quieter, and more elegant. In 1841, Davidson held an exhibition in Aberdeen to showcase his electrical devices. Crowds gathered, amazed to see Galvani roll on a short track, smokeless, noiseless, with only the strange hum of electricity. Among the onlookers was a boy named James Clerk Maxwell, who would later become one of the 19th century's greatest physicists. This exhibition wasn't just a technical success, it was a declaration. Davidson didn't just want to prove a concept, he wanted to change the world. For a Vietnamese audience, Davidson's ingenuity might evoke the creative spirit of figures like Tran Dai Gia, who built weapons from limited resources during wartime. Could Galvani compete with steam? The next part will take us to a fateful test, where Davidson's dream faces harsh reality. September 1842. Under Scotland's grey skies, the Edinburgh-Glasgow Railway stretches through lush green hills, a marvel of the industrial age. Robert Davidson stands beside Galvani, his heart racing with anticipation. With a £15 grant from the Royal Scottish Society of Arts, a significant sum for a humble chemist, he convinced railway directors to allow a test of his electric locomotive. This was his chance to prove electricity could match, or even surpass, steam. But this moment wasn't just a technical test, it was a gamble with his reputation and dream. As Galvani began rolling on the tracks, it moved at a modest 4 miles per hour. No smoke, no roar, just the gentle hum of electricity. Crowds gathered, some in awe, others skeptical. To them, it was a miracle, but also a strange novelty. Railway workers who spent their lives operating and maintaining steam locomotives looked at Galvani with anxious eyes. They whispered about the devil's machine, a threat to their livelihoods. In their minds, electricity wasn't progress. It was an invisible enemy, threatening to take away their jobs and families' security. But the test also revealed Galvani's limitations. The zinc acid batteries, though meticulously crafted, drained after a short distance. With no way to recharge, Davidson had to replace them, a costly and time-consuming process. Galvani could move itself, but it wasn't strong enough to pull passengers or cargo, essential requirements for a railway locomotive. The railway directors, expecting a machine to rival the 30-mile-per-hour speed of steam locomotives, began to lose patience. They wanted power, reliability, and efficiency. Things steam delivered flawlessly. Davidson, with unwavering optimism, pleaded for more time and funding. He believed that with improvements, Galvani could become the future of transportation. This story echoes the efforts of Vietnamese innovators, like the engineers at VinFast, who faced skepticism while building Vietnam's electric vehicle industry. Davidson risked everything, money, time, and reputation, to bring his dream to light. But that light was about to be extinguished by a tragic act of betrayal. Just days after the Edinburgh test, darkness fell over Davidson's dream. On a moonless night in 1842, a group of railway workers, driven by fear and resentment, sneaked into the yard where Galvani rested. With hammers and torches in hand, they smashed the machine, turning its wooden frame into splinters, shattering the batteries and melting the copper coils. When dawn broke, Galvani was nothing but rubble, Davidson's life's work destroyed in a matter of hours. Imagine Davidson standing amid the ruins, his eyes filled with pain and disbelief. This wasn't just a machine destroyed, it was his dream, years of tireless work, and hope for a better future. As an archaeologist of science, I've seen many stories of inventors rejected by the world, but this moment is particularly heartbreaking. The railway workers weren't villains, they were ordinary men, with families to feed, fearing a future where their skills would become obsolete. To them, Galvani wasn't progress. It was a threat, a symbol of uncontrollable change. But this act of sabotage came at a cost. Davidson, though heartbroken, vowed to rebuild Galvani. But the loss wasn't just material. His reputation was damaged. and sponsors, already skeptical, turned their backs. Without funding or support, his dream began to fade. This is a story familiar to Vietnamese audiences. Think of farmers who once resisted modern agricultural machinery, fearing the loss of traditional jobs, or the challenges Vietnamese tech startups faced when introducing new ideas. The destruction of Galvani wasn't just a personal loss, it was a setback for humanity, delaying the electric vehicle revolution by decades. But Davidson's journey wasn't over. He would keep fighting, though the road ahead was fraught with obstacles. Why was Galvani forgotten? The answer lies in a perfect storm of limitations. First, technology. Davidson's zinc-acid batteries were a marvel for their time, but they were heavy, non-rechargeable, and expensive. Each battery was a burden, both in weight and cost, making Galvani unable to compete with steam locomotives that could run for hours on abundant coal. Second, economics. Scotland's coal industry in the 1840s was a massive machine, providing cheap and accessible fuel for steam locomotives. Electricity, in contrast, lacked infrastructure. There was no power grid, no charging stations, and no way to mass-produce batteries. Third, culture. The 1840s world worshipped steam as the ultimate symbol of progress. Electricity was just a scientific toy, something for laboratories, not railways. Compare this to later successes. In 1859, Gaston Planté invented the lead-acid battery, a major advance that made electric vehicles more practical. By the 1890s, electric vehicles like William Morrison's carriage in America or Camille Genatzi's La Jamais Contente in France began to gain attention thanks to improved batteries and a demand for clean transport in crowded cities. These vehicles, unlike Galvani, benefited from a changing world where electricity was starting to be recognized as a viable force. Davidson, unfortunately, was born too early. He was a pioneer, but the world wasn't ready for his vision. Davidson's story is a reminder of Vietnamese innovators, like the engineers at VinFast, who overcame barriers to bring Vietnam's electric vehicles to the global market. Davidson's failure wasn't the end, it was a foundation for those who came later. He proved electricity could move a machine, and that idea, though forgotten, planted a seed for the future. After the disaster of Galvani's destruction, Robert Davidson never truly recovered. He continued working in the chemical industry, but the spark in his eyes, the fire that once fueled his dream of electricity, had faded. No records show he ever tried to rebuild Galvani or pursue other electric vehicle projects. Instead, he returned to the life of a chemist, supplying yeast and dyes, living quietly in Aberdeen. He died in 1894, almost entirely unrecognized for his pioneering contributions. Meanwhile, the world moved forward, and electric vehicles slowly re-emerged. By the late 19th century, inventors like William Morrison in America and Camille Genatzi in France built improved electric vehicles, leveraging lead-acid batteries and growing electrical infrastructure. These vehicles were hailed as wonders of their era, but no one mentioned Davidson, who laid the groundwork over half a century earlier. His legacy was buried in rarely read history books, only rediscovered by scientific archaeologists like me. But Davidson's story is not just a tragedy. He was one of the first to envision a world where transportation didn't rely on coal or horses. His idea, though rejected at the time, inspired later innovators who ultimately made electric vehicles a reality. Think of people like Elon Musk or the engineers at VinFast, who are continuing the dream Davidson began. Every electric vehicle on the road today carries a piece of Galvani's DNA. Davidson may have been forgotten, but his spirit lives on in the smokeless machines we drive today. Robert Davidson's story is not just one of failure, it is a warning. Innovation, however bold and promising, is always vulnerable to fear, doubt, and self-interest. Galvani was destroyed not because it failed, but because it challenged the status quo. History is full of similar stories. Inventors mocked, ideas stifled, only to be proven right years later. As an archaeologist of science, I see Davidson's story as a call to action. We must protect those who dare to dream big. In Vietnam, we've seen this spirit through the efforts of VinFast, turning the dream of electric vehicles into reality despite skepticism. Today, as we drive electric vehicles on our streets, we're traveling a path Davidson blazed nearly 2 centuries ago. Remember him not just as a forgotten inventor, but as a beacon lighting the way to the future. And when you see an electric vehicle glide by, take a moment to honor Robert Davidson, who dared to dream of a smokeless world.